Well, I've been in television news all my life in journalism. I started in television news in the United States in the mid-'60s, working for TV stations in Seattle, where I graduated from college there in journalism. And then I went back and I worked in Baltimore for 4 years doing the same thing, reporting and hosting. And then I went abroad for 10 years and I worked with a news agency, a television news agency. So I had a chance to work start off in London, then I went to work in the Middle East, and I went to Africa, and I spent 3.5 years in Jerusalem and 2 years in Tokyo. So in that 10 years, I really got to see a lot of the world and cover a lot of really interesting stories. We've had a lot of success. Just in the last 2 months, I've heard from 3 students, one of whom has been hired full-time by the CBC and works on the investigative unit, and another student had just been hired to work for CTV in Halifax in the newsroom, and a third student has now been hired by Global Television to be the reporter in Fredericton. When I read the papers in the morning, I see the bylines of students in the Gleaner and in the Telegraph Journal, and we have a student who's with Maclean's who got in touch with me recently and came back to say hi when he was in town, who's now with the Maclean's online video news coverage. The necessity of learning other things, learning history and political science and human rights, sociology, being familiar with all these things, which all figure into the kind of work journalists do, because they're covering stories of every imaginable subject, which is part of the reason it's such a fascinating business. You deal with all sorts of things. You're always learning yourself, and so the exposure to all these other subjects, I think, grounds a young journalist, so they're not unfamiliar with the real world. They take their skills in journalism and apply it to these situations, and they have a familiarity with what else is going on in life. I think the closeness between students and the faculty is very important. I think it's of great benefit to the students. It's also I find it as a teacher, I like the idea of getting to know the students I'm working with and having them come and talk to you and feel free to talk to you. It may be about a project, it may be some personal thing, they may want to talk about a football game, who knows. But having that openness and being able to connect that way, I think is very helpful. And because of the small sizes at St. Thomas, the small size classes, there's much more opportunity to do that. It's very easy to come across the border. We share so many things in common. The kids all dress the same, they all on the Facebook the same, they watch the same TV shows. And there's actually quite an interest, I think, in communicating with people who have a little different background, different culture. But it's not so vastly different that this is any kind of a challenge, I think, or an impediment. I think it might be an attraction to a student to come from another country, the States, for instance, and then spend time in Canada and learn something about Canada at the same time they're getting a really good education.